diving into this report you've got here on Masar Badil. This report is from Honestly Concerned, an organization based in Germany that focuses specifically on fighting anti-Semitism and xenophobia. So where do we even begin with this group? What makes them so controversial?
Well, they burst onto the scene back in 2021, and right from the start, they weren't messing around. When it comes to Palestinian liberation, they advocate armed struggle. Like, they flat out reject Israel's right to exist, the two-state solution, peace agreements. Forget about it.
Yeah, this report really paints them as wanting to completely upend the current situation. And it goes even further, saying they want to dismantle the Palestinian Authority, seeing it as basically a puppet of Israel.
Exactly. They view it as a collaborator. I mean, that puts them at odds with even some of the more mainstream Palestinian factions.
So already we're seeing a pretty radical stance. But then the report goes on to these connections, these alleged ties, to Samidoun, which is a group that's been designated as a terrorist organization by both the U.S. and Canada.
And even banned outright in Germany. The report lays out what they say is pretty compelling evidence of a close relationship between Masar Badil and Samidoun. They point to staff members who work for both groups, joint events they've organized, and most importantly, a shared ideology. That core belief in armed resistance as the path to achieving their goals.
Then there's this whole connection to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP.
Many countries have designated them as a terrorist organization, and for good reason. They have a long track record of violent actions.
And the report claims that key figures in both Masar Badil and Samidoun have direct ties to the PFLP.
That's right. It suggests there's a network here, linking these groups together. For example, their open endorsement of the October 7th attacks against Israel, and Masar Badil's public support for them was unsettling, to say the least. Then there's the fact that they've hosted and praised known Hamas terrorists. It just keeps adding to this picture of their alignment with groups committed to violence.
And it's not just words. This report talks about events organized by Masar Badil, where individuals connected to Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
All of this, combined with their association with designated terrorist groups, has put them squarely on the radar of German authorities.
So it's not surprising they're scrutinizing Masar Badil so closely, looking for any signs of incitement to violence or anti-Semitism.
It seems like they're particularly concerned about Masar Badil's potential influence on students, the risk of radicalization.
This report goes into detail about specific Masar Badil events and activities that have taken place in Germany.
And it brings us to another crucial point the report highlights, Masar Badil's view of the European Union. They see the EU as a colonial power, and they believe it needs to be dismantled, just like they want to dismantle Israel. This gives you some insight into their broader goals, suggesting their ambitions extend far beyond just the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
So we're not just talking about a regional movement here. They're aiming for something much bigger, a more fundamental change on a global scale.
Their ideology and their worldview are certainly cause for concern.
This report keeps coming back to this connection with Samidoun. It almost makes it sound like they're two parts of the same organization.
The report digs deep into those connections, and it provides a lot of specific examples of overlapping membership and shared resources. A name that keeps coming up is Khaled Barakat.
Oh yeah, the report really focuses on him, calling him a central figure in both groups.
Right, and they detail how Barakat was actually designated as a terrorist by both the U.S. and Canada just last year, in 2024. And the designation specifically cited his role in fundraising for the PFLP. And it's not just that. Barakat was even expelled from Germany back in 2020 because of concerns about his extremist activities. So you can see why his involvement with Masar Badil is raising so many red flags.
It makes you wonder, is Masar Badil deliberately copying Samidoun's structure and methods? Maybe trying to get around the ban Samidoun faces in Germany?
Well, that's one of the theories that German authorities are actively investigating, according to this report. They quote several German lawmakers who are getting really worried about Masar Badil's potential to incite violence, especially among young people.
The report specifically mentions this summer camp that Masar Badil held in Germany, where they brought together activists from all over Europe and North America. It sounds like they're concerned it could be a breeding ground for radicalization.
Yes. It definitely fits with the idea that Masar Badil strategically targets universities, seeing them as like key battlegrounds in their fight against what they call Western imperialism.
So it's about more than just spreading their message. It's about actively recruiting and radicalizing students, turning them into supporters of their cause.
And it's not just limited to Germany. The report talks about Masar Badil's activities all across Europe, including rallies and demonstrations where they've openly praised groups like Hamas and the PFLP.
The ones designated as terrorist organizations.
Right, they've even gone as far as celebrating the October 7th attacks, which were widely condemned as acts of terrorism.
It's pretty disturbing that they would openly endorse that kind of violence. And then there's the rhetoric they use. The report documents instances of them using chants like death to Jews and death to Israel at their events.
That kind of language is just unacceptable. It's straight up anti-Semitism.
And it creates this climate of fear and hatred, which is incredibly dangerous. What's the bottom line here? What could happen because of all of this?
Well, the consequences, they could be pretty big, both for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and for efforts to stop terrorism globally. If Masar Badil is actually working together with groups like Samidoun and the PFLP, then they're part of a network that's directly supporting and carrying out violence.
The report even uses this phrase, international brigade, suggesting Masar Badil might be trying to create this group of, radicalized individuals who'd be willing to launch attacks for their cause.
And you can bet that intelligence agencies everywhere are keeping a very close eye on this. Masar Badil isn't just focused on Israel. They see the whole European Union, basically the entire West, as the enemy that needs to be fought.
It's like their words, armed struggle and liberation, but they can easily lead to real-world violence with terrible results.
Exactly. We've seen this so many times before. Extreme ideologies, even when they hide behind political language, can absolutely push people to commit acts of violence. This report makes a really strong argument that Masar Badil's ideology is dangerous and could make things even more unstable and lead to more conflict.
What can we do? How do we counter them and other groups like them?
It's going to take a lot of different efforts. Law enforcement needs to be super careful, watching what they're doing and stopping any potential attacks before they happen. Intelligence agencies need to gather information to understand their networks and what they're planning. And we have to fight back against their propaganda online.
The report also talks a lot about education as a way to prevent this kind of extremism from taking root.
Definitely. We've got to give people, especially young people, the skills to recognize and reject hate speech, conspiracy theories, and calls to violence, no matter how they're presented. If we can help people become more informed and critical thinkers, we can limit the influence of groups like Masar Badil and make the world a safer place.
Well, this deep dive has certainly been a reality check. Thanks for listening.